My entry into the subject of Bigfoot really happened in December of 1972 in Graham, Washington, but I kind of want to go back a little bit further because there were some things that happened, a couple incidents that really stick out in my mind that could have been Bigfoot related. I just don't know. This would have been in the late 60s. We moved out of the small town of Ording we lived in 1966 onto a 40-acre parcel of land that was heavily forested, and the Puyallup River ran through part of that property. Now, there were only 3 homes on the road that we lived on. We were at the very end, and the other 2 houses could not be seen from our property because of the way the road ran around. It was forested at that portion where the last home was. There was an elderly lady who lived there, and farther up the road there was another family who lived, but you couldn't see our home from theirs and vice versa. So this one evening, and it was well after dark, we were watching television, and I was sitting near one of the windows in front of the house, and I happened to notice out the window I saw this light. And it was moving too slow to be a car, but it was too fast for someone to be walking with a flashlight. So I mentioned to my mother that I saw a light out the window. And because no one, I mean, we always knew when somebody was going to come to visit, they would have called ahead of time. And especially late in the evening like that, nobody was going to drive clear out to our place. So we watched this light, and pretty soon, it didn't take long before there was this pounding on the front door, and my mother answered the door. There was this kid. Now, we lived in a pretty small town. There was only about maybe 1,500 people that lived in the whole area. So I would have known any of the kids, especially a boy who was about my age. I would have known who it was, and I didn't recognize him. So he was just in a panic. He said that the rock quarry monster tried to get him, and we'd never heard of anything, called the rock quarry monster before. So my mother was trying to calm him down and to get him to explain what had happened and who he was and where he was staying and everything. So he said that he got onto our road, was riding his bike after dark, and then this big white hair-covered monster was trying to catch him. He said it was, first he thought it was a man trying to walk up to him because the outline looked like a man, and then he saw that it was this huge monster, and he called it the rock quarry monster. Now, my dad worked for the county, and above our property on this mountain above us was indeed a rock quarry. It belonged to the county, that they mined granite that they lined the rivers with to help prevent flooding. So my dad finally come out from the bedroom, and he'd been reading a magazine and found out who this boy was staying with, whose grandparents were, and he loaded his bicycle in his pickup and took the boy home. And then later I heard my parents talking about this, and my mom said, well, what is this rock quarry monster? Have you ever heard anything like this? And he says, nah, I think it's just some hermit that's been poaching up around the quarry. Now, I used to ride my bike on that road every day for a long time, and I never saw anybody out there other than people who belonged to those other 2 homes. There was nobody else come on that road. There was never anybody walking around poaching or anything otherwise, and I never heard of anything besides that. Now, granted, I was a kid, so I may not have heard a lot of these things, but I never saw anything. So I didn't think much of it. And then one afternoon, I was riding my bike like I did all the time. My big thing was my BB gun, my bicycle, and my dog, and usually the 3 of us were together all the time in those days. So I come riding up towards the house, and my mother and my 2 younger sisters were there looking out at the far tree line, which wasn't that far. It was maybe 100 feet or so away from the barn. And cows will typically have a pattern of behaviors, and ours did. They were in the same place at the same times of day every single day. And at that particular time of day, the cows should have been in one of the far pastures grazing, and instead they were in the barn with all of their heads poking out with their ears up, looking at this tree line. And my mom says, come over here and take a look at this. So I rode over and got off the bike where they were standing looking. And when I looked over the trees where the cows were looking and where my mother and sisters were looking, you could see the brush at the edge of the tree line. It was just being thrashed. There was something really big in there, and it was just raising all kinds of hell at the edge of the tree line. You couldn't see what it was. And I'm thinking to myself, well, maybe it's a bear, because a couple of years prior to that, I came face to face with a bear out in those very same woods. And that's an experience you don't forget too easily when you're only 5 or 6 feet away from a bear. But, that's what we thought it was.